As each of us progress through life, gathering experience and perspective, we seldom have the opportunity to recount our personal stories and impart the knowledge we've gained. Walking among us, one and all, are living legacies.
Welcome to another edition of Living Legacies. I'm Tom Morrow, your host. Today we have a very special program. We're talking with two gentlemen that kind of grew up together and then their lives crossed later on in life. Shelby Jacobs of Oceanside and John Reid of Bonita. Now, where did you two gentlemen grow up?
We grew up in the small little hamlet of Valverde, which was a little town set aside for blacks back in the late 30s, 40s.
Now, where was that?
It's Santa Clarita Valley is in North LA County, just north of Magic Mountain. We're at Magic Mountain near 99 or now the 5 freeway and 126 that goes to Ventura.
Well, this isn't the South. Why did you? I didn't realize there was any segregation in California.
Absolutely. The housing patterns and jobs, there were a lot of areas that were segregated. Schools were integrated, but a lot of the opportunities we were not exposed to, weren't accessible to us.
Now, you both went to the same high school?
Yes.
Now, what did your dad do?
My dad was worked as a janitor, and he was a cook at times. Worked in restaurants most of his life. Came here from Dallas, Texas, and he initially worked in the defense and the ship industry at Long Beach. And after the war was over, then he went into doing whatever he could do, maintenance primarily.
Sure. John, what was your dad doing?
My father was an automobile painter. He worked for the local Chevrolet dealership in Newhall, which it was called then, now Santa Clarita. During World War II, he was a merchant seaman. And when he got out of the Merchant Marine in 1946, he moved us to this little hamlet, Valverde, 35 miles northwest of Los Angeles. And he did so because he didn't think Los Angeles was a good place to raise a family. And my dad had grown up in Los Angeles during the 1920s, 1930s. And the reason that he joined the Merchant Marine, he didn't want to join the segregated Navy, segregated Army. And
Which there was really only one basic job in the Navy.
That's correct.
That's right.
Being a steward.
That's correct.
What now? I understand there's a bit of age difference between the two of you.
Yes.
Which one of you is the oldest?
I'm the oldest by about 5 or 6 years. And part of what John just mentioned about families, we migrated here from Dallas, Texas, where we lived in a segregated environment. I walked by a Mexican school and a white school to get to the black school.
There was definite
It was
segregation.
definite by definition there. We lived separately. When I got here, one of the first things I recognized is we went to school together. And we moved to Los Angeles, and my dad decided South Central LA was not the place to be, so we moved, after 2 weeks, we moved to Santa Monica to get out of the concentration of that kind of environment. And a couple of years later, he got an assignment as a pastor of a church which was located in Valverde. So we moved to Valverde and grew up there as a relief from a lot of the concentrated environmental issues that one finds themselves in an urban environment. That's why we went to Valverde, which is similar to his story.
Now, what year did you graduate from high school?
53, and I think he was
John?
1959.
59, so we're 6 years apart. And because of that, we knew each other, but we hung out with kids our own age. So it wasn't until just 5 or 6 years ago that we reconnected.
Now, aspirations. When you graduated from high school, what were your plans?
Before I graduated from high school, I had taken an aptitude test, scored very high in math and science, and the results was I was identified as a scientist or an engineer. And that's the point at which sometime in that period of time, my high school principal found out about that and suggested to me that I understand you want to be an engineer, and that in fact, there are no black engineers, and he recommended that I take a trade. which of course I did not.
You were stubborn enough to.
Not stubborn. I did not read him as I didn't want to permit him to cause me to change my mind.
Right.
I felt like even though I understood that the Jackie Robinson phenomenon had not occurred in industry, I also recognized that if I didn't prepare and the opportunity should come, then I was obviously a part of the problem.
You're never going to
So
get it.
I needed to be prepared. Whether the opportunity was available or not, I was willing to allow that to take care of itself.
Now, did you get any scholarships to go to college?
Yes, I did.
And where did you go to college?
I went to UCLA, and to my surprise, there were not many people there. In fact, the first thing that happened to us, we were 500 kids taking an aptitude test, and then we were told that only half of you would pass. So this was one of the things that I grew up early in life, coming from a small community of Val Verde, recognizing that the odds were kind of long, from impossible to small odds, and so that became the theme of my life, success in spite of the odds, as a result of what I was told in high school, and going forward most of my career, that was always in my mind.
Now, you were an athlete, right?
I was an athlete.
Did you participate at UCLA?
Yes, I did.
And what?
Track and football. And one of the things that I learned very early, that there were a lot of guys pursuing athletics as a way to get out of our environmental condition. And I recognized early that if I were successful in my technical pursuits, that would last a lot longer. And turns out I was right, that athletes have an average pro career of 3 or 4 or 5 years, some a lot longer, but most of them very short. And one of the things I try to do today is to give back to kids, to let them know that there's life after sports, and you need to prepare for it.
You graduated in what year with
I was in class of 57.
with a degree in mechanical engineering?
Well, actually, I dropped out of school because of family problems, and started as a draftsman and worked my way through without the benefit of a degree.
John, did you have that same experience, or had things let up a little bit by the time you started going to?
I had similar experiences as Shelby. What Shelby did not tell you, but I will. He was one of my heroes. I looked up to Shelby. The 6-year age difference was part of that, I guess, but I saw Shelby being successful, and specifically he came back to Val Verde in his Austin Healey sports car. And I was interested in cars.
He must be doing something right.
Yeah, he must be doing something right. And I too had aspirations to be an engineer or a pilot, and I eventually was accepted into naval aviation and became an aviator.
Now, were you in college at the time?
Yes, I was at the University of Utah on a football scholarship. And like Shelby, I realized that there was life after football, life after athletics. And I sincerely wanted to play in the NFL and was disappointed when I was not drafted. Now, looking back on it, I'm glad I was not drafted.
It's probably the best thing that ever happened to you.
Yes.
Now, what did you graduate from the University of Utah?
Yes, I did.
What was your degree?
International politics.
Okay, and you went to NAVCAD?
No, I went to AOC.
AOC, okay.
Officer, AOC.
Aviation Officer Candidate?
Yes. Pensacola, Florida.
Now, what year were you in Pensacola?
I arrived there March the 10th, 1965.
Civil rights movement, it was in 64.
It
Things were still pretty much the same in 65?
Absolutely.
Because I was there in 67 and it hadn't changed all that much.
Yeah.
You have a rough time?
I was arrested for being in a place considered for whites only, but I was with a white student naval aviator, and I spent 4 or 5 hours in the jail. And of course, my commanding officer and executive officer, they learned of it via the shore patrol. And then 2 days later, I was in the office of the commanding officer of the base, and he had the mayor or someone representing the town of Milton in his office. And the bottom line was that if my black personnel cannot go into town and without the fear of being molested, I'll put the town off limits. And so
That's happened several times
Yes.
in Pensacola.
Yes.
And they come begging.
yes. So this gentleman said, "Oh, no, sir, Captain, it won't happen again."
Well, okay, so both of you are out of school. Yeah.
Now, what I was going to
so-
say, the key part of this story that we've been working on this for some time was in 1965, I happened to have gone to Atlanta, Georgia with Martin Luther King on the voter registration drive. That was the same year that Johnson signed the Voters' Rights Bill. And that was the same year that I completed the design for the cameras that were on Apollo 6, which is how we intersected later. The mission for Apollo 6 flew in '68, and that's the year that he recovered the cameras as a naval helicopter pilot. And that also, the date of that flight was coincidental with the assassination of Martin Luther King.
That is a coincidence.
And so that particular mission was overshadowed by the event of Martin Luther King's assassination.
Now, you were working for Rockwell?
I was working for Rockwell at the time as a junior engineer, and I was given an opportunity to take over an assignment that was initiated by a senior person, old enough to be my father. And it was the issue was that NASA had some reservations about the analysis that we had set forth, defining how the Apollo was separation between the various stages. They wanted to be sure that they separated pure and clean and did not destroy the engine, which of course we've seen some of those events later in life. So NASA edicted that we were going to put cameras on board to demonstrate visually verification of our analysis.
Yeah, okay.
And this particular mission, the Apollo 6,
Was that a manned flight?
it was an unmanned flight. And this was designed to have flown several times, but the pictures came out so clear of the separation, and have been shown ever since. This is the only set of film that was taken at that attitude. Most of the film were taken on launch, on recovery after the mission came back, or on the moon.
Now, John, you went into helicopters,
That's correct.
and so you were aboard what ship?
We were aboard the USS Austin,
Okay.
LPD-2. And we were stationed 500 miles downrange from Cape Kennedy during this mission. And our mission was to recover these cameras as they floated down via a small parachute. NASA had installed VHF receivers in our helicopters so that we could home in on these camera cassettes as they came down. And
Well, picking that capsule up out of the water that puts a lot of strain on the copter, doesn't it?
well, we were not going to pick up a capsule. We were just going to pick up these small cassettes.
Oh, I see.
Right.
Or they just let the capsule sink?
Well, I think maybe there's something confused. The capsule you speak of is the Apollo itself.
Yeah.
No, this came down long before that. This was an early event at
Okay.
the separation of the first and second stage.
So you wanted the cameras?
So
is
he
what-
was only looking for cameras, not the capsule. That was a separate kind of recovery.
That's kind of looking for a needle in a haystack, isn't it?
Yes.
No, as a matter of fact, those cameras were outfitted with beacons, so they could. That's why the transponders.
So
they were
so they couldn't
far
miss
enough
them, huh?
along. Yes, they couldn't miss them. And the irony of part of our story is having grown up together, and as he said, he was younger, and I was not totally unaware of what his aspirations were, and it was a result of my having several articles written in the Santa Clarita Valley area by a writer who was trying to understand some nuances of what engineers do in aerospace, and she asked me to to give her an idea. And I went through my archives of drawings and various things I worked on, and I came up with the idea that this particular mission, Apollo 6, had been seen by so many people that chances are she had seen it. So when I inquired of her, she had seen it. So I showed her my drawing, showed her the photos of the pictures going back, and so that became my identifier, which is how, when John and I hooked up just 5 or 6 years ago, as we were going through a 40-year sketch of time and careers, when I said Apollo and he asked me what I did, I had an identifier, and that happened to be his identifier.
What I was going to say, now you've kept in touch all these years.
Not at all.
How did you hook back up?
There was a reunion coming up, and we decided to go to the reunion, even though we're 6 years apart. Small school, we usually meet with
classes,
big classes. So
yeah.
I was given his phone number, and I called him, and he came over to visit. And in our visit, after some 30 years of not seeing each other, we happened to go down through a sketch. When I got to Apollo and Saturn, I told him I worked 40 years on the program. He asked me for something specific, and of course I was prepared, not knowing that that's where he was. So when I said the separation on Apollo 6, he went, wow, what a coincidence.
That'll be darn.
So that's how we reconnected on this story, and we've been telling this story and having written about it.
Well, a great story. 2 hometown guys make good.
Yes.
Yes.
Unbeknown to each other. I don't know if he was behind me, so he might have had an idea that I was doing okay, but having not seen him, I knew he was a good kid, and I knew something about his father. I knew the possibility was good for him compared to other kids we grew up with who had less influence from their parents. So it wasn't until just a few years ago, 2004, I believe, about, that we reconnected, and now we've become
Well, I know John stayed in the Navy. You retired in the Navy. What was your highest rank?
Lieutenant Commander,
Okay.
04.
Okay. And Shelby, how many years did you spend with Rockwell?
40 years I spent with Rockwell, and I've been retired living here in Oceanside 11 out of my 12 years since I retired.
40 years.
40 years.
And what position did you have when you retired?
I was my last position was project manager for a project on the shuttle program that's still flying. We provided the Rockwell designed, developed, and produced the hardware, the interconnecting hardware between the external tank that provides the fuel to the orbiter, and all of the information goes back and forth between them, goes through this umbilical. Well, my last 15 years was spent as a program manager of the production of those, as we delivered them from Downey to Martin there in outside of New Orleans, that goes on the tank. Currently, it's every time they fly, my hardware still flies.
I was going to say, with every shuttle launch, you probably you're right there.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What do you think what's next for the space program?
Well, I think the space program, they've got contracted already the replacement vehicle for the shuttle, and I think from what I've heard about the schedule, it will not come online in time that the shuttle itself will be recertified to bridge the gap, so that we have a vehicle to operate. I think originally this was supposed to happen in 2010, but the new vehicle probably is going to be a little late. I don't know, several years or whatever. They're in the process of assessing that. And I think certainly along with that, they will certify the extension of the life of the current shuttle as we know it.
Now, is Rockwell still in existence?
Rockwell is in existence by virtue of the fact that Boeing bought them out the year after I retired.
So it's now the Boeing.
It's now part of Boeing, as is McDonnell Douglas and they've consolidated a number of companies over the years. So it's now Boeing operates all of what Rockwell had in the aerospace and defense. I think everything but their automotive part. The automotive part of Rockwell still stands alone.
Now, John, did you stay in copters?
Yes, I did. But I also flew fixed wing, and in an indirect way was involved with the space shuttle program, flying with the Air Force in the early 70s. And Shelby and I just found this out about a month ago, talking with John Naharano.
I bet there's a lot of disbelief when you found out found out about this.
Yes.
We're pleasantly surprised. We
Yeah.
wouldn't know that, yes. It's always a pleasant surprise. As we talk, like you say, as recently as just the last couple of weeks, we discovered something else that he was involved in the space program that I was involved in, and it's just amazing.
Small world.
Small world.
Very small.
Now, the community that you grew up in, is it still there as a predominantly black community?
No.
No, it's been like most communities. It's grown, and it's a part of the suburbs of Los Angeles now. So there are lots of people up in that area, all the way up to up 5 as far as you can go.
It's just another
community.
bedroom
I mean,
community.
there is the park that was put there for the purpose of blacks, and I think 37, was it 38?
Yeah, that's about
That
it.
park was put there because blacks were not welcome in the parks in Los Angeles. It is still kind of the key spectacle of that community, but its complexion has changed and certainly grown.
Well, now you go back for the all-class reunions, but do you ever have an opportunity to go and speak with young people, young black people, to give them inspiration on what's possible? I mean,
Yes.
you've got both of you
Yes.
guys kind of paved the way.
I've been doing that for years. Rockwell sent out would send out teams of engineers to the inner city of Los Angeles back in the 70s. My daughter teaches here in Oceanside at Reynolds Elementary School for a number of years. She's now on the base, but I came down for about 6 or 7 years and gave lectures to the kids on Science Day. Just last spring, I went to several schools with Palomar College at Vista and San Marcos middle schools, and John and I attended another event at a school in the South. So we've done this kind of thing. That's part of what we're doing now, is trying to give back to motivate and stimulate youngsters that it can be done by example, even though often people don't see, and if they were to see us on the street, they wouldn't know what we did.
Sure.
So that's part of what I'm doing, is to get out to let people know that there are positive role models that can encourage young kids, that it has been done, is being done, and can be done even by them.
John, did you go into some other field after you retired from the Navy?
I bought a convenience store and made a decent living, but it wasn't me. I didn't like it, and I got out of that business, and now I own several properties, and that keeps me going.
Sure.
I do volunteer work with Optimus International. I'm also a volunteer at the San Diego Maritime Museum, and
Well, now Bonita, there are a lot of retired Navy folks down there.
that's correct.
Sure.
I used to call it Navy Bonita, but now it's evolved, and the civilians have outnumbered us now.
Yeah, I ran into my old commanding officer. I used to be the bartender in Chula Vista back in the 70s when you couldn't buy a job, and during the Carter administration, and he walked in and I said, "Where are you living?" And he said, "Bonita." So.
Yeah.
What's his name? Maybe I know.
Piper.
Yeah.
Piper.
Yeah, he was Lieutenant Piper. I can't remember what his first name is. But now, Shelby, what have you done since retirement?
I'm retired here. I serve on one of the city commissions, Integrated Waste Management Commission. I've tutored at my church for 4.5 years. Work with NAACP and other organizations in this era of trying to make sure that we encourage youngsters to do the right things, get in school, and et cetera. So I've been quite active in the community since I've been here.
Well, one thing. Well, let's go back just a little bit. You had mentioned that you were back with voter registration with Martin Luther
1965. That's
King.
right.
Did you get to meet the great man?
Yes, I did. Yes, I did. I was in his presence, got to meet him, and unfortunately, it was just an amazing experience to be there with the number of young people who were giving their all for a cause. And he, as a symbol of that, it was just an awesome environment to be in, to see those things coming to fruition. And
Well, I know he had a particular persona on camera, but what was he like off camera?
he was a a fun-loving, joking guy. The speeches, the famous speeches he made, you wouldn't know he has a set of humor. And I guess I've had people tell me the same thing. As an
Yeah.
engineer, they thought that's all you do is, speak in those long sentences, big words and formulae. And so he was a down-to-earth person. A guy
Guys,
was a really great guy. Yeah.
we've run out of time. It's been fun. This has been a great story that both of you had to tell, and I'm glad that you were able to come in and share it with us. I'm Tom Morrow. We've been talking with John Reid of Bonita and Shelby Jacobs of Oceanside, and hopefully that you'll join us again next time here on Living Legacies.